Hey beautiful people, what is up and welcome back to my channel. I am Jamila and I love all things beauty. I love all things makeup, I love all things skincare, and I especially love sharing my tips and tricks for how to find high-end and luxury beauty products at bargain prices. If that sounds like something you are interested in, I would absolutely love if you would consider subscribing and joining the fam. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna call this video yet, but it is gonna be a chatty get ready with me. I've just been thinking about the beauty community lately, and I had some thoughts particularly about indie brands and indie makeup. So I figured, getting ready for work, why not just do a get ready with me and just talk about it. So I did do a little itty bit of scripting, and that's mainly because when it comes to doing videos, what helps me is that I will get an idea and I will write it down, and then from there I will start like writing down my points, because it really helps me formulate in my mind what I want to talk about, so it's not all over the place, and then it may or may not get turned into a video. I have so many things just kind of written down in this book. It's kind of like journaling but for YouTube, kind of. Anyways, so I do have some points that I want to make sure that I get out. Now, I will have all of the makeup that I'm going to be wearing listed down below, but this is not going to be focused on me doing the makeup application, just me chit-chatting. So, my eyes are prepped and primed and ready to go. I'm going to be using the Nomad Cosmetics She's in Parties palette. I picked this up during their birthday sale, so I was able to get this for 30% off, which I think makes this like $30-something. It's really, really pretty. It's like this dark, mauve, grungy color story, and I know everyone loves this, so we're going to dive into some mauvey grunginess today. Okay, I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit closer. Not too close, because like I said, we want to chit-chat, and then we'll just get started. So I feel like as of late, the beauty community has been a little ugly, which is, you know, saying something. And it's really kind of like bothered me, the amount of drama that keeps kind of like bubbling up as of late. And it's not a ton of drama. I might be being a little over dramatic there, but there's just been a lot that's been happening in the beauty community lately. And, you know, I've always watched a couple of videos. Well, I've watched a couple of videos in the past of like larger creators talking about the fact that the beauty community is dead, drama killed the beauty community. And I've always been like, the beauty community is alive and well. I feel like we always talk about the beauty community when we're referencing larger creators like Jaclyn Hill, James Charles, Jeffree Star, but they are less than 1% of the beauty community. So sometimes it just irks me, because I think it's a little bit unfair to put this entire stain, you know, to assume that the entire beauty community is dead because these 3, 4, 5 creators are trash. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about today is kind of like my journey in purchasing and consuming indie makeup and indie brands, and what I've learned since I started, what I've seen from my experiences with brands, and just kind of like talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything kind of in between, and then also give you guys a little bit of tips and tricks for if you are looking to get into the indie market. What are the things that you should be looking for? What are the things that you should be wary of? So, quick, I guess, disclaimer or some housekeeping notes. I am not going to be protecting any brands. I will call brands names. I will call brands out when I'm talking about this, because I have no brand loyalty, period. If brands are doing shitty things, I think that you need to talk about it. I hate when I watch creative videos and they talk about a brand doing something shady, but then they don't tell us which brand it is. Like, what was the point? You could have kept that to yourself. You know what I mean? And part of the reason why I'm like, if I have an experience with a brand, I want to talk about it, is because, again, I have no brand loyalty. These are businesses at the end of the day. And while these businesses may be owned by 1 or 2 people and it's essentially their baby or whatnot, at the end of the day, you and me as a consumer, we have a right to have good customer service, good experiences, because we are taking our hard-earned money and putting it into these businesses. So I'm not going to sit here and protect any brand by not calling them by name. And this is why I appreciate Tina from the Fancy Face, because she has no issues calling brands out. And it's not in a way to send people to go attack these brands, to cancel them, stop shopping from them. It's never that. It's just an awareness thing, because you can't make smart decisions if you don't have all of the information out there, you know? This shade is a lot darker than I thought it was. So I'm going to have to go in with another shade to lighten this up, because this is a very, very deep transition shade. So I had always been really into makeup, kind of like pre-COVID, but before COVID really got started, my makeup journey, or my makeup, what is it called? My makeup style was really, really minimalist. I would do foundation, maybe some concealer, and some bronzer. I never did eyeshadow. But once COVID hit, I actually kind of like dived into this world of eyeshadow. One, because I had the time now. I was working from home, so I had a lot more time to get ready in the morning. And I was getting ready to go into my living room. And two, I could actually practice and feel comfortable doing it at home, because if it turned out horrible, which it did for the first several weeks, I wasn't exactly out in public, so no one could see it, you know? So that really, really got me into eyeshadow specifically. And once I started getting into eyeshadow, you know, I started the way most people did, with all of the mainstream brands. I was buying the Urban Decay, the Too Faced, the Tarte, all of those brands that you find in a Sephora or an Ulta. When it came to me really getting into makeup in 2020, and really getting into all of these different products like blush and highlight and all the other stuff, it was really, really because of the fact that I was at home and I could practice. And I was really only purchasing things that I could find in a Sephora and an Ulta and a TJ Maxx. I'm not lying, but like at least 50% of my collection was built on TJ Maxx and Marshalls. So don't sleep on TJ, because you get them good brands for cheap. Now, once I really started getting into eyeshadow, and like I said, I was using the Too Faced and Tarte palettes for the most part. And I felt like I wanted more. I wanted a little bit something else, because as I've come to realize now, those aren't it. Like when you think about the level of pigmentation, the level of impact, it's honestly mediocre at best. So, you know, I started really, really consuming a lot of YouTube in 2020 as well. I had been watching a lot of beauty YouTube before that, but I feel like 2020 really, really kicked it off, because I had all the time now and we were doing nothing. We were literally stuck indoors. What else was there to do? So I really got into watching beauty YouTube, and the more I watched, the more I kind of like fell into this niche of watching creators who did luxury content as well as indie content. And I really fell into this Pat McGrath hole. I don't know how or why, but I started watching all of these creators who were using Pat McGrath, which was this super duper high-end luxury indie brand. And I was like, okay, I could never see myself spending that much money for a palette. Guess how many motherships I have now. Anyways, so I really, really got into Pat. And then one day Sephora had a 50% sale off of one of her quads. It was the Iconic Illumination quad, and I decided to pick it up. And that palette opened my eyes to this whole world where there is eyeshadow that's available that is just insane. I had never seen so much sparkle. I had never seen so much pigmentation. I had never seen such a unique formula. And once I tried it, I knew there was no going back. So, and I believe I'm remembering this correctly, you know, Pat really was my first kind of introduction into this world of indie makeup and high shine and high sparkle and super unique formulas and shades. I want to make one distinction before we get too kind of like deep into the video. When I say indie makeup, you know, most people when they hear indie makeup, they're thinking of small brands, these kind of like mom and pop, 1-person, 2-person run businesses. But indie brands, indie means independently owned. So there are two types of like indie, or two categories as I like to think about it. There are larger indie brands, like your Pat McGrath, your Natasha Denona, and they are larger, and I consider them to be larger because they can be found in Sephora. They're not just sold by itself on that Etsy site or that person's individual website. And then there are these smaller brands, the Glamlight, the Nomad Cosmetics, the Adept Cosmetics, the brands that are not found in Sephora or Ulta or any department store, and the ones that you have to purchase on their website directly, and that are really and truly run by like 1 or 2 people. So I'm going to be talking kind of about both of them and my experiences with both in this video. Quick sidebar, I have been testing out a palette, and I'll do a video on it later on, and I have absolutely hated it. and I've been wearing it for the last 3 days, and it's just made me miserable. So to use this and have like eyeshadow that works is just like, thank you, Jesus. So like I said, the more beauty content I consumed, the more I got introduced to these sort of indie brands. And after I tried Pat McGrath, I feel like a lot of creators, they talk about Pat McGrath and Natasha Denona all the time. So as I was listening to and watching all these YouTube videos, it was like, okay, I've tried a Pat McGrath palette. Now I need to try Natasha Denona. And I was really paying attention to all of the brands that they were talking about. And I decided to take this leap of faith and this dive into this world of indie. Now, since then, and by then I mean like since 2020, I have really dug into indie. I have tried so many different brands, brands that are based in the US, brands that are international. So Sigil Inspired is from Russia, Odin's Eye is from Sweden. I don't know where Kaleidos is from, but it's definitely not America. Shine by SD is from Canada. I think Cleona is from Canada. So I've really kind of like gone down this really large rabbit hole of trying all this indie makeup and trying different brands and trying different formulas, and it has been a ride. And as with all things, there are good things that come with buying indie makeup products, and there are bad things that come with indie makeup products. And now that I feel like I've been purchasing indie for some time, I feel like I have a good sense of what are the things to look out for, what are the things to be mindful of, what I really like about the experience of shopping indie, and what I really don't like. So let's dive into, I think I'm gonna like break this out into like 3 sections, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I may kind of move in between all 3, but I'm gonna try to keep it as concise and, you know, linear as possible. Okay, so the eyes are pretty much done, so I'm gonna get started on the rest of my face. And let's continue. So, like I said, I want to start with the good and then go to the bad and the ugly. So, first things first, and you've probably heard this a million times, when it comes to indie makeup, they have the most amazing color stories. If you look at an indie eyeshadow palette, you will see that they pull together these color stories in such a unique way. Like, they put all of these really beautiful colors together in a way that you don't really see in mainstream brands. And I think part of that too is that mainstream brands are really catering for the masses, and most people are not out here wearing the most bright, colorful, in-your-face type makeup. They want something that's a little bit softer, a little bit more neutral leaning. And that's what I've just come to accept with mainstream brands, is that they are not necessarily marketing for makeup lovers that want to be really colorful and extravagant. So they tend to keep things really neutral, which I think is why we see all of these really repetitive color stories from some of these brands like Tarte, Too Faced, Urban Decay. Second, in addition to indie brands really having some of the best and most unique color stories, the pigmentation that their products have is unreal. Like, I find that oftentimes when I use, you know, some of my older products, like my Too Faced, Tarte, you know, Urban Decay, I find that I'm often like really struggling to build pigmentation to get to the level that I want. And with indie makeup, it's been just kind of like, boom, right off of the bat. Here is color, here is impact. And I've always really appreciated that, because being somebody that is darker in complexion, having these soft shades, sometimes they just don't show up on me. And I love that indie makeup is really pigmented so that they really show up beautifully. And, you know, everything from high-end to, not high-end, but like big indie to like these smaller brands. Like Pat McGrath has some of the best eyeshadows. It still is my favorite eyeshadow formula. And the pigmentation that she has in her mattes, even in her shimmers, is just out of this world. Natasha Denona, like her shimmer formula, her cream to powder formula, all of those are so beautifully pigmented that they show up on all skin tones. And with really beautiful pigmented eyeshadow comes very unique formulations and very unique formulas. I did not know what an astral shade was, or could be, or what a topper shade was, until I got my first Pat McGrath palette. And she had these really flaky shades, because the iconic illumination is all special shades. So I didn't know about those formulas until I tried Pat, and it was like, wow, this is so different. Like, the sparkles were just, the shimmers was just like crushed stars. I say it all the time. It's like wearing crushed stars or crushed diamonds on your eyes because it's just so unique, so different. And even when you think about brands like Natasha Denona, she has her cream to powder formula, which is unbelievable. Like, I didn't even know that you could create an eyeshadow that started off as a cream, but then as you blended it, it became a powder. And that's one of the great things about indie, is that you're always introduced to these very, very new and unique shades, new and unique formulas, and you're able to really test how they work together and come up with some of these very creative, multi-dimensional looks. What I found with like mainstream brands is that you will get a matte and a shimmer, maybe a metallic. And that's pretty much all that you have to work with. But with these indie brands, and for example, like Kaleidos, they create these palettes that have mattes, shimmers, toppers, duochromes, all of these shades in one palette, and you will never find that in a mainstream brand. If you have, let me know, because I have never seen a mainstream brand put out some of these very, very unique palettes that have so many different formulations. And I touched on this too, but just now, but I didn't really get into it. But like multi-chromes, duochromes, you weren't seeing that in mainstream. I think it's only now we're beginning to see some mainstream brands try to do it. Like, I know Urban Decay did their Cyber palette, which was supposed to be like a multi-chrome palette, which was just 12 shades of ash, in my opinion, because I saw that and I was like, who's that supposed to work for? And they tried to create this multi-chrome / duochrome formula that is like a little bit softer because, like I said, they're creating for a more mainstream population that might not necessarily want the Terra Moons and Cleona style of multichrome and duochrome. But it was light and ashy, and I don't think anybody liked it, at least from the videos that I saw. So yes, you get amazing color story, great formulas, and great pigmentation. The other good thing about indie brands is that you are supporting us, most of the time you're supporting a smaller business, and oftentimes a lot of these smaller businesses are woman owned, people of color owned, queer owned, so you're really putting money into like minority populations, into minority families, which I absolutely love. Like, I have grown to really dislike the fact that when I buy from some of these larger brands, they're going to these major corporations, to these people who I don't necessarily think have the best views or my best interest in heart. But just knowing that I'm supporting a smaller creator, a smaller brand, has always made me feel really good. And it warms my heart even more when I'm able to find out that that brand owner is like a black woman or a queer person or some other minority, because I think that people of color, particularly black women, spend the most in this beauty industry. The beauty industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and most of the money that goes into that comes from people of color, yet we are not the people that are benefiting. So the fact that we are able to create brands that operate in this space just makes me feel so much better. And then the last good thing that I want to point out when it comes to shopping indie are the personal touches. What I've always appreciated, or have really, really come to appreciate since I've started purchasing from particularly smaller indie brands, not necessarily Natasha and Pat, is that when I buy a product from the brand, it usually comes with a very, very personalized touch. For example, Nomad Cosmetics, when they ship out their palettes, all palettes come with a postcard and your name is like signed on it. So to think about the fact that, you know, that these owners are sitting there taking the time to write really personalized notes before they send out their packages, it just gives you this really nice, warm feeling, because it's a personalized touch that you're not gonna get. Like, to be quite frank, Sephora will throw all your stuff in a box, could care less if it will break or not, and then we'll ship it out to you. So I have always really appreciated those small personal touches, because one, it shows that, you know, the owner really, really cares about the product and the presentation, and really, really appreciates your business. Like, understands that, you know, you could have spent your money anywhere and you chose to spend it there. And it's not something that they have to do. Quite frankly, it might actually speed up shipping times, but I still do really appreciate the personal touches that oftentimes will come with purchasing from a smaller brand. Okay, now let's talk about the bad. Before we dive in, just take this with a grain of salt, because I'm really talking about all of this from my perspective, from my experience, from what I've observed from like online comments or whatever. So this may not be your experience. This may not be true for you, and that's completely fine. Like, we can have different experiences and we can have different opinions, and I'm not here to argue about your opinion versus my opinion. So one of the bad things about shopping indie, and a lot of these are bad-ish, so they may not necessarily be like fully bad. But the first thing that I want to talk about is that many small indie brands tend to private label. Now, if you don't know what private labeling is, just really quickly, it's basically where a creator, an owner, whatever, purchases already pre-made shadows. As in, they don't design the shadows, they don't get to tweak the formulas, they don't get to decide if they want it to be more creamy or whatever it is. They see an eyeshadow or an eyeshadow palette that they like, they purchase it as is, they slap their logo on it, they slap their brand packaging on it, and then they resell it, which is not necessarily a bad thing, which is why I say this is kind of bad-ish. And I say that it's not necessarily a bad thing because I think that for brands that are now starting up, private labeling makes sense. Everything that I've heard and everything that I've kind of learned makes it very clear that starting a brand is very, very expensive, and creating a formula from scratch is even more expensive. So a lot of times brands will start off with these private labeled products as a way of, getting their names out there, getting, building brand recognition, building capital so that they can create their own formulas. And then once they've gotten to a point where they are financially secure, in a financially good place, then they can really start developing their own formulas and really tweaking it to their specifications. Now, the reason why it is kind of bad is because not every brand is forthcoming and discloses that they private label. And in 2020, one of the things that I noticed is that indie brands, small indie brands, started popping up left, right, and center. And a lot of them would put out these really, really beautiful duochrome and multi-chrome palettes. And I saw from a lot of creators that they would purchase multiple palettes from multiple brands, and then you would swatch them and it would be the exact same shade. Now, I know It's Belle Cosmetics, they have been very open and forthcoming about the fact that they private label. I'm pretty sure Adept Cosmetics used to not Adept, is it Adept? Alien Cosmetics. I am pretty sure Alien Cosmetics used to private label. I think now that they have a more, now one, they're Unearthly Cosmetics now, and two, I believe that they have since tweaked the formula so it's now more personalized, it's now their own, it's not a private labeled formula. But a lot of these brands, when they first started, did not disclose that they were private labeling. A lot of them still are private labeling. So when you see these really, really beautiful eyeshadow palettes with these very unique color stories, and you decide to buy from this brand and buy from this brand, you could really end up with the same shade like 6 times if these brands are all purchasing from the same company, which is one of the bad things I've kind of noticed when it comes to shopping indie. Unless a brand is really forthcoming and really open about the fact that they private label, it can be really hard to figure that out. And sometimes you figure it out the hard way by actually spending your good money on the palette, getting it, and then realizing that, oh, I have this shade, or I have all of these shades already. Now, all of the brands that I'm saying private label, or like I said, I know It's Belle has very specifically disclosed that they do use private labeling, but I'm pretty sure Sugar Drizzle Cosmetics and Simply Posh Cosmetics private label as well. But I have no idea if they disclose that, and this is just question mark. So I don't know if they're private label or not, but if you do, let me know down below, because I feel like it's really hard to find out from brands because they are so tight-lipped about whether or not they're private label. And the last thing that I want to say about private label, which falls in the baddish part, is that one of the things that I noticed too with all of these brands that were private labeling is that the price was out of this world. Like, there would be some brands that would have some really nice, relatively affordable palettes, $20 to like $30 range. But then you would see some other brands which clearly have the exact same shade and formula selling it for like double that. And that is one of the things that really, really bothered me about, shopping from smaller indie brands, is seeing and knowing good and well that this is the exact same shade, the exact same formula, but the prices varied so wildly depending on which brand you choose to buy it from. So if you are diving into the world of indie, I definitely recommend that you take the time, do some research, figure out, do you have that shade already? Don't just go ham and start buying from all of these brands all at once. Now, the other thing that I've noticed when it comes to indie is that most of the brands that I'm talking about literally only sell eyeshadow. So one of the things I've noticed is that smaller indie brands tend to start off in the eyeshadow space, and then they may or may not venture into other products like blush, lipsticks, but none of them really dive into complexion products other than the larger brands like McGrath. I don't even think, does Natasha Denona have a foundation? I don't even think so. LYS has like a complexion range, but most of these brands really tend to stick into just the eyeshadow lane, and you might get a blush. Might. That is a strong might. And I wish that there was a little bit more availability of other products. Like, give me a foundation, give me a concealer. But like I said, those things are really expensive to make. It takes a really long time. You can't just slap a label, as far as I know, on a butt look on a foundation and call it your own. So I understand why they tend to stay in just the eyeshadow lane. And I'm completely fine with, you know, buying my foundation from an Urban Decay, Too Faced, Chanel, like Dior. I'm okay with that. And the last kind of like bad-ish thing about these indie brands is that they oftentimes don't compensate creators very well, as far as I know. Like, I've seen a lot of creators have non-affiliated codes with smaller brands, and by that it means that they don't make a commission off of it. You are able to get some money off of your purchase, but they don't get to benefit from having sold you that product. And I get it. These brands don't necessarily have the budgets to pay creators that much money. But if you are a creator, one of the things that you want to make sure is happening is that you're getting paid for your work. Whether it's because you're promoting the product, or whether it is because you're doing swatches and doing eye looks, and that brand is going to use your photos to promote their product and to get more sales. It does kind of suck a little bit to see that there are so many brands that don't have affiliated codes, or so many creators that have non-affiliated codes, which means that all of their hard work, they just don't make any money from it. And I'm gonna say this just once: free product does not equal payment. Like, it's not the same. It's not equivalent. It's not equal. Just because they may or may not be getting PR, it does not equal payment, period. Okay, so let's talk about the ugly, the really bad parts of shopping indie and what I've learned in my indie makeup journey. So first and foremost, one of the things that I absolutely hate, and I think is the worst part about smaller indie brands, that they do a lot of pre-orders. So what pre-orders are is basically you purchase a product and you don't get that product for several months. You're essentially pre-ordering. It means that the brand does not have the product in stock, and they are not going to ship it out within like 5 business days. It means that you now likely have to wait several weeks to several months before you actually receive the product that you paid for. And that's why I get hung up on it, is that you have paid for that product. Now, I get it. Some of the brands need the money up front so that they can actually purchase the product, because it's hard to just shell out money to buy a bunch of products to have it in stock, not knowing if you're going to get it sold. But it bothers my spirit to know that I have given you my money, you have taken the money out of my account, and now I have to wait up to 6 months before I can actually see the product that I purchased. At that point, I don't even know if I want it anymore. I am no longer inspired. I could have forgotten it. Now, sometimes it does come as a really nice surprise when you're like, oh shit, this palette that I purchased 6 months ago has finally arrived. But to be quite honest, by that time, a lot of the hype has died down and you could care less. So if you are comfortable with pre-orders, if you are comfortable waiting for forever and a day to get a product, then that might work for you. But me personally, I have realized that pre-orders are not something that I am willing to deal with anymore. So unless the product is in stock and you are able to ship it out to me like within the 3 to 5 business days that you are supposed to, I don't want it. I really don't, because I know that I'm going to forget about it in 6 months and I'm not going to care. I remember my very first Adept Cosmetics purchase. It took months for it to come. And by the time I finally got the palette, I was just over it. I was really just irritated by the whole experience of having spent, I think, close to like $100 because I bought multiple palettes, and then not seeing those products for months. And by the time it came in, one, it was just no longer hot or fresh. No one was talking about it. So like I didn't do it. Now I know since then Adept has done more like stocking up, which is what happens with indie brands. The more popular they become, the more they can do things like having stock ready, so it's easy to go. But if you are really diving into that small world of indie brands, be prepared for pre-orders, and then figure out if it's not something that you want to do, because there are some brands where you don't have to do that. The other thing that I've seen as a really bad issue with indie brands is the return policies. Like, for a lot of them, you just can't return, or sometimes the actual effort to go through to return a product to get a refund is just not worth it. Now, that is one of the ugly things I think about the indie makeup industry, because when it comes to me buying something at Sephora or Ulta, if I don't like it, I can take it back. Sephora will give me my money back immediately. But it doesn't really operate the same way when it comes to indie brands. I'm pretty sure most of the time you have to print your own label, you have to pay to ship it back. Like, is it really worth it at that point to go through the hassle of returning a product? It actually might be easier if you just try to sell it on Mercari. So that becomes like one of the really annoying things when it comes to indie brands, is that the return process can be really difficult. The refund process can be really difficult for some brands, which kind of sucks. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is that when it comes to indie brands, I have often felt like there is a lack of representation when they showcase their products. So I have always been really like kind of vocal about, I think larger brands need to make sure that they have the products demonstrated on multiple models, multiple skin types. And I feel like when it comes to indie brands, it's a lot harder to see that representation. Like, I have found myself several times when I see a new release, commenting under that and being like, do you have swatches on a deeper skin tone? And it can be really annoying having to continuously ask to have swatches on deeper skin tones. And sometimes the responses are like, yeah, sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the brand has tried to get deeper swatches, but it's not always that. I do remember that Glaminatrix had a new palette that was coming out, and they actually got a lot of backlash because all of the swatches that they had were on lighter skin tones. If I'm not mistaken, Glaminatrix is an Australian brand, and they actually paused their release to get swatches on deeper skin tones before releasing it. Because me, as a black woman, as a deeper complexion woman, I don't want to buy a product without first seeing how it looks on my skin. Like, what is the point in that? So, one, I'm glad that they decided to pause their release, but it shouldn't have been that way in the first place. I could care less if you are Tarte or if you are the smallest indie brand. Representation matters, period. And I feel like while we have to give some of these smaller brands some grace, we still need to hold them accountable for certain things. And that is one of the things that I like to hold brands accountable towards. I also remember Nomad Cosmetics, when they released their America's Parks palette, they had sent it to a number of creators, and they only had swatches on, at best, tan skin. And I actually reached out to the brand, and I was like, listen, I want to buy the palette. It looks really beautiful, but I haven't seen this swatched on anybody deeper than tan, and that is a problem because I am a medium deep complexion and I want to buy this palette. And they actually were very receptive to that feedback. And since then, they've done such a good job at making sure that they have swatches on deeper skin tones. I know that they have worked with a number of deeper complexions, I believe, complected creators like Colorful Camille. I know she has a YouTube channel and she's deeper than me. So they've done a really good job at making sure that their releases are shown on deeper complexions. I've received one, palette from them. The new one, the Paradise Islands, that one was gifted to me. But, yeah, they are not like the first brand where they're not the first, and I'm sure it won't be the last indie brand where I've had to reach out and say, hey, do you have swatches on a deeper complexion? Hey, maybe you should have swatches on a deeper complexion. And those are things that I feel like it's 2020. Black people and people of color shouldn't have to be asking brands to show their products on deeper skin tones. Like, really? We still doing that? Okay, 2 more points on the ugly. First, slow and unresponsive. One of the things that I've noticed when it comes to indie brands is that their response time to dealing with consumer complaints can actually be quite slow. Like, when it comes to if I have an issue with Sephora, there's usually a number, or even Ulta, there's usually a number I can call. They have representatives available all the time to help me deal with my issue. Because these brands are really like one person, these smaller brands I should say, not Patricia or Natasha, they're these 1-2 person shops. Like sometimes it can actually take a really long time to hear back from the brand. Sometimes it can be really, really unresponsive. And when you have spent your money purchasing a product, whether it is $5 or $50 or $500, you deserve to have access to a customer service representative so you can get your issues resolved. You purchase a product, you should get the product that you purchased, and you should be able to contact somebody and get help if the product that you purchased was not as described or doesn't perform as described or is defective or damaged, period. So when it comes to, you know, being in contact with some of these smaller brands, you know, one of the things that I've realized is that you just need to deal with really slow response times. Make sure that you are contacting them via email, Instagram, whatever it is that they have out there. And just really be on them. And that's just one of the things that I don't like to deal with personally. But if you are diving in, if you are diving into the indie world, it's something you should know, you should be aware of. And then the last thing that I have seen, which is I think one of the biggest and the most ugliest issues when it comes to the indie world, and in some ways the makeup world just generally, is that I've seen this kind of like rise in brands silencing consumers, blocking consumers. Like if you have a complaint, if you are unsatisfied with your service or with your product, you know, these brands are now out here blocking people. Like Pat McGrath, I've heard, is like famous for blocking people when it's like Team Too Much. Natasha Denona, I'm pretty sure she's been like deleting comments since the North situation. We see you, Natasha. And recently I've heard that Clarity Cosmetics has been out here blocking people left, right, and center, deleting comments, not responding to people's emails. And my thing is, are you serious? Like, as a brand, you are never going to get 100% positive feedback. You are going to get negative feedback sometimes. And you need to create an avenue for people to send you feedback. Now, I agree, if people are being disrespectful to the point where it is, you know, racist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever, any kind of slur, sure, delete those comments, feel free to block those people. But if people are genuinely just, one, asking questions about like, where is my order, why blah blah blah, or they are expressing discontent, like, or dissatisfaction with the service that they've received, I don't understand why they would have their comments removed or deleted. I don't think that brands should be silencing consumers, because that's how other people figure out that this might be a potential issue. And that is one of the ugliest things that I think I've seen with some of these smaller indie brands. Like, I honestly don't know if these bigger brands are out here doing the same. To be quite honest, they probably are. I'm pretty sure Tarte did it with their launch. But I feel like as I become more ingrained in the indie community and not necessarily the mainstream community, I have really seen that kind of like rise and bubble up. And it's one of the things that I'm like really, really side-eyeing. Okay, I'm going to finish up the rest of my face, and then I'm going to come back and give you guys just a couple final thoughts and a couple of tips for how to really successfully shop within the indie market if that is something that you want to get into. Okay, I'm back, and this is the final face. For the lips, I am wearing my Haus Labs combo, so I believe it's the Neat Liner. So it is the Neat Liner Le Monster Crayon, Lip Crayon, and the Attitude Lip Gloss. Really, really nice combo. And like I said, I will have all of the products linked down below if you were curious about how I created this face. So I just wanted to quickly wrap up my thoughts on, you know, my indie makeup journey and give you guys some tips in terms of how to shop for indie makeup if you were interested in getting into that. So just in closing, what I've come to realize with indie makeup is that there's a lot out there, but there's also a lot to be mindful of. I'm really happy that I started purchasing indie products. I'm really happy because I've discovered all of these new textures, these new formulas, and it's really helped me to be a lot more creative in my eyeshadow. And I will definitely 100% keep shopping indie. I don't believe in that whole like cancel a brand thing because they do something wrong. And all brands are going to do something wrong, and these smaller indie brands are no exclusion. So I honestly, I can pretty much count on one hand the amount of brands that I don't shop for at all and still have room, i.e. Jeffree Star. But when it comes to brands, I am willing to give them, you know, the opportunity to change and shift their practices. So my first tip really is just be observant and do your research. When it comes to shopping indie, I think that you have to take the time to really understand the brand that you're purchasing from to make sure that it is one that agrees with your sort of ethics and morals. And, you know, there may be like some shady things that pop up, but then take a look as to how the brand has rectified that. Now, one example that I do want to point out is that a few months, I believe last year, Adept Cosmetics had a huge scandal because they were approached by a consumer who mentioned that it was not a very accessible website for them, and the brand responded really aggressively. Like, it was not okay at all. They did apologize, and they have included a statement on their Instagram page. It's still there, which I checked, which I really do appreciate, that talks about, you know, how they were wrong, how they were taking accountability, and how they were making changes to address that. And I appreciate when brands are like, listen, we messed up, we were wrong, we're taking accountability, and here are some actions that we have already taken and that we are planning to take, and that they make that really visible. I think you should be aware of brands that are deleting comments, that are, you know, shying away from criticism or responding really aggressively to criticism and really attacking consumers or the people that are purchasing their products. That to me is like a giant red flag and something that you should be mindful of. When it comes to shopping indie, definitely, like I said, do your research, especially when it comes to return and purchasing policies. Make sure that you're looking at what the shipping policies are. Make sure you're looking at what the return and the refund policies are, because, you know, things happen, things get broken in transit, but at the end of the day, it's your money that you have spent. It's your hard-earned money, and you deserve to get a product that is impeccable, that performs well, that's not damaged. However, you know, they will have all of these weird things in their shipping and their return and refund policies. So make sure you're looking at that to be sure that you're comfortable with what their policies are before you purchase from that brand. That being said, just know that you have rights. A former YouTuber, Betsy Gotcha, did a really amazing video, and I will be sure to link that down below because it's one that I go back to several times, where she talked about your rights as a consumer. She is a small business owner, so she knows what it is to sell products and what is required of the business when it comes to selling products. And she did a really good job at laying out, you know, as a consumer, you have specific rights. You have rights that protect you so that you get the product that you purchased as it was stated in the time frame that was stated, or you get your money back, like, period. And then that kind of leads me to like my last tip is make sure that when you're purchasing these products that you purchase through a secure way. And by that I mean, consider using your PayPal or look into your credit card policies to make sure that you are protected. So if you do have an issue with a brand and they are being really hard in terms of giving you your refund, giving you a replacement, or whatever the case is, you can file a claim through either your credit card company or your PayPal account, and they will rectify it for you. Because like I said, as a consumer, you have the right to get the product you purchase. So in closing, I don't want you all to be afraid or scared to shop indie. When you really get into makeup, into indie makeup specifically, it is this whole new world that opens up, and it allows you to really explore and be creative. So I hope that this doesn't deter you from shopping indie. I honestly hope that it encourages you to shop indie because, like I said, you're shopping smaller businesses, smaller creators, and you do get to explore like very creative, unique color stories. But I also want to make sure that as you guys are diving into that world, that you're going there kind of armed with what you need to know to be successful and to be able to have a great experience. And that's it from me. So this was kind of like my experience with indie, what I have learned. I would really love to hear from you guys what you have learned or experienced in the indie makeup market. So just leave that down in the comments below. If there are specific brands that you've had really great experiences with, I would absolutely love to hear that as well, because those are the brands that I want to support and put my money into. If there are brands that you had negative experiences with, put that down in the comments as well too, because I think it's important for other consumers to know about those experiences so that they can make the decision for themselves if that is a brand that they want to support. So, I know this was probably going to be a little bit of a long one. I apologize. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And like I said, leave a comment down below. And of course, share with a friend if you think they will like the content. As always, I love you guys so very much. I can't say thank you enough for all of the support and for constantly watching my videos and commenting and engaging. As always, I will catch you guys in my next one. Bye!